Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. We've got a lot to discuss tonight as it relates to early in the Orioles minor league season as well as the major league season, including a lot of storylines revolving around pitching, whether that's pitchers moving down from the major leagues to AAA, as was the case with Cole Irvin last week, or some minor league pitchers who were off to very hot starts. We're going to cover that tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about how this could affect movement in the farm system over the course of the season. In addition, we're going to get into the hot start that Heston Kjerstad is having at Double-A Bowie as his momentum from late last season in spring training carries over into the regular season. But first, I'll start off with one of the bigger news items surrounding the Orioles in the last week, which is the demotion of Cole Irvin from the majors down to AAA Norfolk. Irvin, as our listeners will recall, was acquired from the Oakland A's in an offseason trade that saw infield prospect Darrell Hernaiz go to Oakland in the deal. Irvin was supposed to be a guy that would come in, stabilize the rotation, and eat innings. And over his first three starts, he really struggled. 12 and 2/3 innings pitched, posting a 10.66 ERA and an uncharacteristically high 8 walks, which comes out to a walk per 9 innings rate of 5.7 against 13 strikeouts. Irvin going down to Norfolk on what looks like a temporary basis as he has some things to work on. Nick, I'll start with you here. You kind of knew that the Orioles were going to need to make a move here soon. Kyle Bradish is expected to come off the IL officially perhaps tomorrow for the start against the Nationals. But the fact that Irvin went down, while his numbers from a numbers standpoint was not a surprise, the fact that he was one of your big acquisitions of the offseason did make this an interesting development.
Yeah, yes, and I completely understood why they did it and figured at some point that could be a real possibility if he wasn't on his A game, to be honest. Like, the beginning of his Orioles career could not have started any worse, but having the options, I think, is one thing that made him so attractive to the Orioles. And it's not like he's the type of pitcher who I think the Orioles said, hey, look at this guy. We're going to make him a high strikeout pitcher. We're going to drastically change who he is. I think he is who he is. And the Orioles viewed him as, or viewed that team control that he has, the versatility he has when it comes to the minor league options. I think all of that played a major role into, bringing him into the organization. The fact that being a fly ball pitch to contact pitcher at Camden Yards isn't a death blow to pitchers anymore. This is still a younger guy who you can bring in and tweak. And unfortunately, you're just walking a ton of guys. I was looking at comparing some of his numbers earlier today. He did have a 13%. He's got a 13% walk rate in the major leagues right now. That was after a 5.5 and a 4.9% walk rates the last 2 years. First strike percentage was only 52%, which was awful compared to 65, 66% he was doing in previous years. Just when he was throwing pitches in the zone, batters were making an absorbent amount of contact against him, like 92, 93%. And just not good. When he doesn't have that control, everything else is falling apart. I'm fine with sending him down to Norfolk. He's pitching right now. I watched the first couple innings. He was okay. But send him to Norfolk, let him work with Justin Ramsey, let him assimilate a little more, and then bring him back up in a couple weeks and see what happens. But it's not like the trade's done. The A's won the trade. It's just he's a young guy. He's got options. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I love Darrell Hernaiz, but don't look at his numbers so far on the early season either. No, this makes a lot of sense to me because from what I understand, he's actually has tweaked some of his off-speed pitches and to improve the movement profiles. And apparently it is like the quality of the pitches is improved, but apparently he's just not hitting the spots that he was hitting with them the past couple of years. And he's either missing entirely or leaving it too much in the middle of the plate and it's getting hammered. And even his velocity is up a tiny bit. So I just think it's, he's getting comfortable with the new coaches. They're making some changes. He's just got to get comfortable with them. And there's no one better to work with on that than other than Chris Holt, than Justin Ramsey in AAA. So yeah, I mean, if he's your sixth starter, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is a guy who's throwing like 180 innings around the last couple of years with an ERA in the mid to upper threes. I don't think he's like collapsed all of a sudden. I don't think he's like a completely different pitcher. So yeah, send him down there. Dean Kramer, who knew, just got to face the Washington Nationals and you improve your numbers on the season, but he's pumping 97. But if he continues to falter, then Irvin's right there to come right back up if needed. Same with DL Hall. A lot of options. Spencer Watkins, former guest of the show. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. Like Connor said on Locked On Orioles today, that this just shows that the Orioles really do care about winning right now. And if you're not going to get the job done, then go figure it out in AAA and come back when you can help the team win.
What that move doesn't mean, at least for the here and now, is that Grayson Rodriguez is going back to AAA Norfolk. There had been a lot of question marks about this, about whether or not Rodriguez was going to be a short-term filler for Kyle Bradish, which seemed unlikely, but was still speculated, especially if he couldn't pitch well out of the gate. And so far, the results from Rodriguez have been interesting to say the least. He has had rough starts in each of his first three outings so far, or excuse me, rough innings in each of his first three starts so far. And in two of those games, they were in the first inning. However, there's still some very encouraging numbers, including 19 strikeouts in 14 to third innings pitched. And while he does have 7 walks, most of them came in one outing against Oakland. In his other 2 outings, he's actually done a very good job of compounding the strike zone and not getting behind him a lot, throwing a lot of strikes, which is good to see from a young pitcher. So, Bob, we're only 3 starts in. You're looking at a small sample size. With that said, from what you're seeing with Rodriguez right now, do you think he's going to stick in the majors for the rest of the year?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially because since he was brought up before the first 20 days of the season, he was able to get that major league service time for his AAA time. And he also can still get a draft pick if he finishes in the, first or second in the rookie of the year. So that's a bonus and a reason to keep him up. Also, Zach, I think you actually predicted this like nail on the head when we did our predictions, either in the offseason or preseason. Like, he's the rookie pitcher going through his lumps, and he's still looking pretty good most of the time. And of course, everyone's going to freak out. Oh, he's a bust. No, he's just going to take time to learn. This is what happens to major league pitchers. I don't care how good you are. Look at Kyle Bradish last year, first half versus second half. And Grayson's he's averaging 97 miles per hour in his fastball. We saw the changeup finally arrive in the last game against the White Sox. I think he's actually looked better each time out. Obviously, a lot of nerves in that first game against the Rangers in his home state. Shut them out in the 4 innings, second through fifth. And the A's, he was like 1-2 counts, 0-2 counts. He was so close to having just a dominant performance, and it just, he couldn't finish him away. And then I thought he looked great against the White Sox. First inning, be damned. I mean, the changeup was absolutely disgusting. The fastball was where he wanted it. He can still refine these pitches, but he has a 6.91 ERA, but an expected ERA of 4.74, a FIP of 3.95, and an xFIP of 3.25. So not worried at all. Just keep throwing him out there. Let him learn at the major league level. He's learned everything he needs to in the minor leagues. This is how you get better, is pitching in the majors.
Amen. I mean, first of all, like I didn't watch Sunday start live because with the delay, I think all the minor league games were over. So it was like, all right, it's getting late. Sunday family dinner time. I'm gonna go. I'll watch it Monday morning on replay when I get to work. But I was checking on Twitter throughout that start, and I could not tell if Grayson Rodriguez was pitching or Dan Straley had returned and was back on the mound. Like, Twitter was falling apart. The hot takes were flying. I saw a lot of people use the term goofy takes. I'll repeat that since we're a family-friendly show. A lot of goofy takes from people on Twitter, like no filter. I get that's what Twitter's for, but this is Grayson Rodriguez, people. Like, this regime developed him into the top pitching prospect in baseball, and he got that ranking for many, many reasons. And like Bob mentioned, he is a rookie with 3 major league appearances under his belt now. And that outing on Sunday even came on the road in the cold. Was that like 30 something degrees during that game? It's raining.
Like 15 mile an hour winds.
Yeah. Like a lengthy rain delay out on top of that. So yeah, he got beat around, but he found his groove. I think honestly, if he sticks in this rotation for the rest of the year, which he should, like there are going to be times where full outings where he's probably going to get beaten down on multiple occasions because he is a rookie. But all I care about is he improving throughout the year? And on Sunday, you mentioned the changeup. I saw a couple like, you guys should have listened to Keith Law like a little bit more. Those takes went pretty ice cold like immediately on Sunday because that changeup, like you mentioned, you compare the 3 games, the first 3 outings, the changeup had 29 inches of vertical break to 32 inches, then to 35 inches. And that correlated with 1 whiff to 2 whiffs to 8 whiffs on just that pitch alone.
Yeah, if that's a batting practice fastball, then the home run derby would be a lot more boring.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yes, he did have 4 hard hit balls as well in that first inning, but then over the final 4 innings, he only allowed 4 hard hit balls. So, yeah, is the command crisp? No. Like, there's the first inning thing. Does that need to be worked out? Absolutely. There are issues, but he is a rookie. I just think it's funny how to see people outside Orioles fandom will watch him pitch and be like, oh, yes, he's developing into like this top of the rotation arm the Orioles need. All the data looks great. This looks good. This looks good. And then when I'm following, there's like so many Orioles fans watching him. It's like, bust. He sucks. We did it again. This organization just can't develop pitching prospects. Like, he's a rookie. Chill. Like, but yeah, should he be in this rotation for the rest of the year? Absolutely. Because, I mean, maybe you got to, Aaron Judge has to take you deep 450 feet for you to learn how to pitch to Aaron Judge. Like, that's just going to happen. But you're not going to learn by blowing by 99-mile-an-hour fastballs past some bum named Tim Beckham down at Harbor Park. Like, you're not going to get better by doing that. So keep him in the rotation. Grayson looks great. Fantastic outing. I'm excited to keep watching this guy pitch.
Well, I think what we're seeing in play here is kind of the subtleties between a bad major league lineup and a typical AAA lineup and how that can differ. I was in attendance for the Oakland start, and the one thing that the A's did really well was they adjusted after that first time through the order. And it got to the point where Rodriguez was struggling to find the outpits. Bob mentioned earlier, a lot of 1-2 counts in that, where he would end up throwing a lot of pitches because guys would just start fouling stuff off. That's the kind of adjustment that's going to come into play. When you're facing major league hitters for the first time. The one thing that has stood out to me with him is that when I look at a young pitcher, especially over their first 5-10 starts, I don't pay that much attention to walk rate because I just guess that is going to go up. They're adjusting to the major leagues. They're facing more advanced competition. And let's face it, they're probably not getting the same borderline pitches that they got in AAA. That probably comes later on, but up front, they're not going to get that. And when you consider that Rodriguez has had 7 walks so far, and that 4 of them came in that outing against Oakland, where he was ahead in the count a lot, that's actually a very good sign for me for his command. It's just a matter of, I think, figuring out how to mix his pitches in a little bit better. And whatever it is that he has to do in the first inning is obviously something that has to be worked out. Maybe that's changing something in his bullpen. I don't really know, but it's clear that some of his secondaries, especially the changeup, could be a little bit more effective in the first inning. But everything that I'm seeing so far from him kind of leads me to believe that when he is at his best this season, he is going to be the Orioles' best starting pitcher. I don't really think there's any question about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easily. I mean, you can see there's at least plus fastball, plus changeup, plus slider potentially. Probably fringe average curveball. The cutter looks like it has the potential to be plus. I think that's actually a underrated pitch right now. It seemed to be working for him from time to time. He went to it a lot. I think, was it against Chicago, one of those games. I think he's just going to get better as the season goes on. To me, he's, along with Gunnar Henderson, how we talk, he's got the growth mindset. He's like doesn't take failure lightly. He's not going to quit when he doesn't succeed. It's going to make him want to succeed more. I think Grayson has the same type of mindset. Same with DL Hall, actually. I think it's just a matter of time. And I know this has been going around too. Look at Clayton Kershaw, his rookie year. Look at Corbin Burns, his first season and a half. I mean, this is just stuff doesn't mean as much when you get to the major leagues. You got to learn to pitch, and Grayson's going to do that. No problem.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, talking about Grayson Rodriguez and like Gunnar Henderson, the whole thing. I mean, Jared Kelenic is one of the best hitters in baseball right now. If he can turn things around, I'm not worried about anybody. But I pulled up Grayson's projections here. I mean, you look at the Zips projections on Fangraphs. I mean, he's pacing. It's only 3 starts. I know that. But I mean, he's pacing to pitch to those projections. Like 11 strikeouts per game. He's at 11.93. I imagine those probably do come down a little bit, stabilize a little bit. The walks, Zips had him at 2.9. He's at 4.4. Obviously, I think those are going to come down as well, as we talked about. He gets that command control under like smoothed out. Everything else will fall into place a little bit. ERA of 4.07, Zips projected ERA. The expected ERA right now is 4.74. 0.2 WAR already projected for 1.3 to 2.0 WAR. Like he's doing everything right at this point right now. So not worried at all about Grayson.
We'll turn our attention now to DL Hall, who we really have not had a chance to talk about this season. Hall is 3 starts into the season down at AAA Norfolk, and so far there's been some pretty interesting results from him. And kind of what you would see in a typical DL Hall start. His first 2 outings, he had a combined 12-4 strikeout to walk ratio over 7 1/3 innings pitched. Those were both against Gwinnett, the Braves AAA affiliate. In his most recent outing at Nashville, he allowed 2 runs on 2 hits with 3 walks and as many strikeouts in 4 innings pitched. It took him 89 pitches to get through 4. So that efficiency issue coming back into play a little bit for him. But the stuff has looked good so far, especially when you consider that he's coming off a shortened spring training, and a spring training that was shortened enough that it probably cost him a legitimate shot at making the rotation out of camp, as he really didn't get going until about mid-March. So, Nick, I'll just start with your thoughts here on what we've seen from Hall at AAA to this point, and where do you see him fitting into the Orioles' plans this season as far as the major leagues are concerned?
It's a very tough question, and one that I honestly keep evolving. My opinion keeps evolving, we'll say, on DL Hall, because over the offseason, I'm like, there's no reason him or Grayson Rodriguez should pitch another game in Norfolk. But obviously, Hall had the injury to miss that big chunk of spring training. So you understand why he started the year back in Norfolk. Stretch him out, keep him as a starter, fine with that. I still think you keep him in Norfolk's rotation for a couple more weeks, half the season at least, whatever it takes to see if something really starts to click for him. But honestly, I am feeling more confident in Hall's ability to make it as a big impact reliever. Like honestly, not just like, well, he could fit in the bullpen. The stuff could translate. I think it will translate very well in the bullpen at this point. Like look again at what he did over his last 7 outings last year in the big leagues. After he got lit up for 3 runs on 4 hits and recorded just 1 out, he had 7 relief outings, 7 2/3 innings, 1 run, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. That's pretty dominant. And you look at what he's doing in Norfolk right now. The final stat lines aren't great, especially that first outing. And you saw a lot of the comments like that's the same DL Hall, 80 pitches, 75 pitches just to get through 3 innings. Yes, but you look at like the swing and miss stuff. He had 15 whiffs that first start. The next outing, he had another 6 strikeouts, another 12 whiffs, just 3 hard hit balls, 4 hard hit balls total, I think, in his first 2 outings. I think, you know what? If, he's still requiring 80 pitches to go through 4 innings, you bring him up and you put him in the bullpen because he's going to be that swing and miss reliever for you. You don't have to worry about the control as much. And I think he can be extremely effective in that role. Bring him up around like the trade deadline, closer to the end of the year. How many teams unload the farm system for an impact reliever like that at the trade deadline to push them over? DL Hall could be that guy for the Orioles if it doesn't end up clicking for him as a starter. So I know the final lines aren't super inspiring if you're just box score watching, but if you're looking at like the swing and miss stuff, the hard hit stuff, those numbers look fantastic. So
yeah, and to be fair to Hall, he appeared in 2, maybe 3 spring training games before the season started, between the majors and minors. He's still getting built up. He's still getting into in-game shape. Basically, this is almost like, I feel like his first 3 starts are like his last 3 spring training starts. And now that he's up to the 90 pitch almost mark, let's see what he can do over the next few weeks. And like Nick said, that was going to be my point exactly. Even if he's just start him every game until he goes on a hot streak and he goes on a run or something clicks, or someone gets hurt and he just gets a shot in the rotation. But if that never happens, it's going to be very tempting to just bring him up, especially if the bullpen continues to struggle a little bit. Like, you don't need to trade a Jordan Westberg for a half a year rental of a elite bullpen arm. You bring up DL Hall, and he's in your bullpen for the next 6 years. So, or even for this year, and then you can try him as a starter again next year. I mean, there's no rush. He's still young. The arm talent is there. It's just when you have an arm like that and the depth of starting pitchers that the Orioles have, it's just a luxury at this point. It's either going to be a Josh Hader or it's going to be a Blake Snell or better. But I have no doubt that he's going to be a key part to this pitching staff for the next rest of this decade, basically.
Yeah, I think in the short term, Hall is really not major league ready because, as Bob said, he needs to be stretched out a bit. And if you're looking at him as a possible starter, he would not solve what has really been the biggest problem that this Orioles rotation has had, which is not going deep into games. I think that we know even in his best, DL Hall is not a guy, at least that I look at and think, is going to go deep into games. He's a guy that if you get five plus really dominant innings out of, you're satisfied with that and you turn the game over to the bullpen. So Hall is not going to solve that problem for the Orioles right now, which really leads me to one of two schools of thought. Either you leave him down in AAA for, half a season, if not longer, stretch him out, you let him get some spot starts down the stretch, maybe work him in the bullpen a little bit, and look for that full build up to the rotation in 2024. Or you go with the scenario that Nick mentioned, you bring him up and you put him in the bullpen. I'll admit that coming out of spring training, that was not one that I was particularly thrilled with, only because I was thinking ahead to 2024 and wondering, well, if you put him in the bullpen all year, now you're going to stretch him out next year. And you have another year where you've got a guy who's got a lively arm who can bring a lot to your rotation, that whose innings you're going to have to manage carefully because you're moving him out of the bullpen. So you had Tyler Wells last year, Grayson Rodriguez this year, then DL Hall in 2024. But as I start to think about it more, maybe trying him in a relief role later this year does make sense, especially because we know that bullpen arms come at a premium at the deadline. That is when teams overpay for relief help. And the teams that have, one or two good relievers, but they're struggling, they're out of contention, are going to want to dip into this Orioles farm system. And if DL Hall can sort of, and I'll say this, there's one thing I don't think Mike Elias is going to be desperate for in terms of trading a lot of prospects at the deadline. It's going to be relievers, but it would lower the desperation a little bit.
Yeah, and it's just my thinking too, changing on DL Hall a little bit is just it's that performance from the bullpen already. I don't think it's as drastically bad as some people make it out to be, but eventually, if the rotation keeps pitching like this and this bullpen keeps getting worked like this, that bullpen they're going to get exhausted sooner rather than later. And then, Michael Givens, we haven't seen him back on the field in an Orioles uniform yet in a regular season game. He should be back soon, but what if he can't be that good insurance policy that you were hoping he would be in case of other regression? Like, what if he can't be that and he struggles? What if Dylan Tate's out longer than expected? He comes back or finds out he's not fully healthy and he's back on the IL, or, Ciano Perez, what if he just completely collapses this year? Whatever it may be. Because of all of that, I think you've got DL Hall sitting right there in Norfolk. He is a luxury, like you mentioned. He can either keep stretching him out as a starter, or we know, because he's already done it, we know if worse comes to worse and this bullpen needs a big time injection of energy, just bring up DL Hall and plug him in, and he's ready to go for you. So
he could learn under Danny Colum, that lights out lefty. He could learn right from him and how to do it.
I'm going to throw another name into this mix before we start focusing more broadly on the farm system, and that's Noah Denoyer, already on the 40-man roster, 11 strikeouts through his first 10 innings at Norfolk against just 3 walks, a 1.8 ERA in that stretch. Here's someone who can do a little bit of both for you. He could be a short inning guy that gets you outs in high leverage situations, or he could be that long man option you go to for bulk innings. And hopefully it would kind of be like Austin Voth without all the home runs in the first inning.
Yeah, it was really cool to see Denoyer get that shot to start and then just put up 5 shutout innings. That was awesome to see. And clearly this is a guy that the organization believes in. He was a project of theirs from that, not getting selected after the 2019 draft, and and between his own skills and their development, he has become one of the best arms in the system. And he's a guy that, like you said, could be an Austin Voth where he could start and he could be successful, but he could also be a very nice to have multi-inning relief arm. It's been great to see. It's nice to get the StatCast numbers on him as well. We need that for the entire minor leagues. It's very helpful in our evaluations of these players, and has done nothing but make me like Noah Denoyer even more.
Yeah, the no walks was huge, and I think we talked a little bit last week because we recorded during the Wednesday, I think last week too. So Norfolk was already facing Nashville, and talked about that Nashville lineup has guys like Keston Hiura, Sal Frelick. I mean, it's got some good veterans, a lot of guys with major league experience, and a good mix of good young top prospects for Milwaukee. And for Denoyer to step in there and kind of this unplanned start, I'm sure he was probably going to pitch that day, but to step in as a starter, throw 5 shutout innings, a 40% called strike plus whiff percentage, that's huge. When you're looking at like 30% being the baseline, 40% is huge. Yeah, that was the big issue. I remember talking very early on in Denoyer's career when we first started this podcast about, well, if he can control the walks, he can hone those in, Denoyer's going to be a guy. And he did. He immediately honed in those walks. That hasn't been an issue for him as he's moved up the ladder. So normally, you see fewer strikeouts, more walks from guys. Denoyer, you're seeing better and better control and command out of him. So, yeah, I don't know. I just think he's going to end up being kind of like that, like a Tyler Wells type guy for the Orioles. And once he comes up.
We have seen a lot of really dominant pitching performances over the first two weeks or so of this season, at the lower levels of the minor leagues as well as up at the higher levels like Norfolk. So we're going to take a little bit of time tonight to talk about those. I'm going to start with Bob here. When you look up and down the system right now, you see guys like Chase McDermott, Trace Bright, Gene Pinto, Drew Rom off to really good starts. What has stood out to you, or who has stood out to you so far?
All of them. I mean, it's been so awesome to watch just night in and night out. It's like someone else is just the star of the show. And since we're talking about stars, let's go Trace Bright first, because, man, he's something else right now. He's clearly too good for high A ball. He's got a 1.13 ERA and a 1.11 xFIP and a 0.30 FIP. Striking out, just 54.5% of batters, only walking 6.1%. It's just silly. Yeah, fantastic. Gene Pinto, he's trying to beat Bright up to AA Bowie, repeating the level and just not, letting it get him down. He's, again, only walking 3 batters, struck out 14. It's just like, I know Aberdeen's a pitcher's park, but they've played a series on the road as well. And that Hudson Valley team was an offensive juggernaut, and these guys were like the only two that could hold their own against that competition. So those 2 guys in Aberdeen have been a highlight of my my early season watching.
Yeah, let's talk about Trace Bright for a little bit, and that start specifically. You mentioned the 54.5% strikeout rate he's got through 2 starts, which is just insane. But I went back, that start against Hudson Valley the other day, it rained the entire time, first and foremost. From start to finish, it was pouring down rain. And yet he still had command of all 4 of his pitches. And I sat there and got to watch. The fastball was like 91, 93. Curveball is like mid-70s curveball. It's one of the more beautiful pitches in the entire organization. But then I watched Chase McDermott before we hopped on, and that curveball is just perfection. But Bright's changeup looked good. It was, a harder changeup to start, like 86, 87 miles an hour. And then you saw it cool off a little bit, but it's got good movement. Slider as well, got some swing and miss with the slider. That's clearly like his 4th best offering. But being in this slider sweeper revolution right now, and the Orioles track record of turning guys into like big time slider guys at the major league level, and then just thinking about prospects like last year, Justin Armbruster, Carlos Tavera, Noah Denoyer, all those guys took big jumps with their slider. If you can take Bright's slider and make that a weapon, Trace Bright just becomes like that much more intriguing. And you look at Fangraphs, he's got like a 30 grade command right now, 40 future value grade command. I haven't seen that so far at all. He's pitching lights out right now. So he's living up to every bit of hype that was placed on him this offseason.
One thing that stood out to me focusing on his command is in that start against Hudson Valley, he was really putting the fastball wherever he wanted to put it. He could work both sides of the plate really well. That allowed him to complement the secondaries, which, as you said, Nick, look really sharp. And if there's one pitch that I think this organization knows how to teach and can teach, it's that slider sweeper combination. So even if you do have a little bit of concerns about, what if hitters start catching up to that slider, or what if he's just locating it uncharacteristically well in his first two outings, that's probably part of the development plan that the Orioles have for him. And when you look at everything else, it just looks so good. And for fastball velocity, again, kind of looking early in the year, I don't pay too much attention, or I'm not too worried about that unless the guy is way down. So there's probably reason to believe there's a little bit more left in the tank there from him velocity-wise than what the gun on Hudson Valley's speed showed him having.
Yeah, absolutely. He's 6'4", listed at 200 pounds. There's definitely a tick or two that can be added there, but clearly the qualities are there. The metrics as far as release point and all that inverted break is probably good. And if there's one organization where your worst two pitches are going to be slider and changeup, I think the Orioles is where you want to be. They've taught some people some changeups, that sweepers going in there. They're even feel like adding cutters to certain people, so they'll mess around and see between the regular slider, the sweeper, and the cutter, which would be the best weapon for him to have, and maybe all three of them. But it's if he's going to be able to command his pitches the way he has, and there's only further thing, he's only going to go up. If your command is the last thing to go, so if you have that, they can tweak the pitches and make them a little bit better, and he'll be bright.
Yeah, he's been a lot of fun. I do want to sticking with Aberdeen though, and his teammate there, Gene Pinto. I thought it was pretty funny. The broadcast, the Hudson Valley broadcast mentioned this at some point in that outing, that they're like, I don't know if he's throwing a fastball harder than 90 miles an hour. And to be honest, I don't know if he did hit 90 in that outing. It was just slider, change up, slider, change up. But it was working. The guy's pitched 9 1/3 innings already this year. He has 14 strikeouts, 2 earned runs, 3 walks. And really the only issue last year was the walks. And he's not doing that so far. And he's faced 2 really good teams. So I'm at this point with Gene Pinto, I just want him to get promoted to Bowie. I want to see what that stuff looks like against AA competition. And considering he spent all year last year at high A and he started out so hot already, I could see him being one of the first bigger promotions we see this season. And I'm excited to see what he can do because it's going to be a big jump for him. But even if he is just a relief prospect, I think he's a super exciting relief prospect in the system. The king is back, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and we have seen his velocity, or at least I've seen it as high as 93 before. So it's kind of weird that he does have these lulls in velocity and consistency, but at the same time, that slider changeup combination is just something else. And if he's not walking batters, that alone he'll be a multi-inning weapon at the major league level in a couple of years.
Agree. And if you're looking for an arm that could really raise his stock at Bowie right now, Chase McDermott, who had what would be his quote-unquote worst outing of the season just before we recorded here on Tuesday night. 4 1/3 innings pitched against Altoona, allows 2 runs, 1 earned on 2 hits, 3 walks against 5 strikeouts. But that now gives him a .68 ERA on the year in 13 1/3 innings pitched with 17 strikeouts in that span. As Nick mentioned, the curveball right now looks really good for McDermott, and you pair that with that high fastball velocity he always has and that hoppy fastball that he has. That has been part of the reason why he's been so successful to this point. So, Bob, I'll let you start with this one. We had McDermott on back in spring training, and he talked about some of the adjustments he was making including ditching the changeup for the splitter, and the fact that this was really the first extended run that he had with the Orioles, kind of getting into their pitching program over the offseason and spring training. Do you think there's signs of really tangible adjustments being made right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can just tell he's more in control. Maybe the command isn't, you know, spot on, but everything's around the strike zone. And the stuff is so good that that's all he needs to do is just have it be around the strike zone. It's like Felix Bautista. He kind of pumps the strike zone, but it's not like he's spotting his command. He's just around the strike zone. And the stuff is so good that hitters can't hit it when it's around the strike zone. And I feel like McDermott's kind of similar in that regard. And the movement on his pitches, fastball, changeup, curveball, slider, whatever, it's stupid. It makes no sense. And even his xFIP, FIP 1.60, 2.37 before today's start, it's for real. And I never thought that he would fix the command issue or control issue this quickly. So if that's going to be the case, then he's another relief option, honestly, for the end of this year if the Orioles need it.
Yeah, he did. I think it was the first pitch of the game tonight where that exploding fastball almost exploded onto a guy's face, and that was scared me a little bit. But yeah, I don't think he really had any other pitches after that were like, whoa. He looks much more poised this year, and I think I'll say right now through 3 starts, the strikeout stuff is definitely there. I mean, he is. What did Vivek call him? Chase McStrikeouts. He's living up to that nickname for sure. If anything, so far, I would say, I've said this before, I've been a big Chase McDermott guy since his days at Ball State, watched him a lot in college. But even coming into this year, I would have said, yeah, he's probably more reliever. And honestly, I'd be fine if you stick him in as a reliever and bullpen already, and Bowie already, and he could literally be up in the major leagues by the end of this year. But now I feel a lot more confident in his ability to stick as a starter. And that is truly exciting. As long as that command holds, which right now it looks like it is, as long as that command holds, you've got another really intriguing pitching prospect. Him and his teammate down there in Bowie, Cade Povich. Cade Povich really turned it around in his second outing. I didn't get to watch that one, but I did see the thing that stuck out to me about Povich's second start. I don't know how many strikeouts he had, strikeouts to walks. I don't have that in front of me, but I do have, he threw 79 pitches and 50 of those were for strikes. So clearly he pounded the strike zone, got a lot of swing and miss. I think both of these guys are going to be under a pretty big microscope with each start they make this year. And so far they're impressing pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good segue over to Povich and some of the dominant performances we saw over the last week from him and Drew Rom. I'll start with Povich, though. He delivered 5 shutout innings in a win on April 15th over Akron, striking out 7 batters in that span while walking just 2. And that came off of a start at Hartford that was not very good, where he only went 3 innings, allowing 2 runs on 4 hits with 3 walks and 3 strikeouts on 63 pitches. That was the first outing was kind of what we saw from Povich at the end of last year, where it looked like the long season was finally starting to catch up to him. But then the second start basically made the first start look like a fluke. And I'm pretty hopeful right now that the second start is more characteristic of what we're going to get from him at Bowie this year. And one of the things I think makes him such a good prospect is he's got, 5 or 6 pitches that he can throw. And when he's able to throw even just half of them for strikes, he's at a big advantage over the hitters.
Yeah, he's like a guy that he doesn't need every pitch to be working. Like this last start, it was the curveball. The curveball was just on fire, on point, and he went to it, and it worked. So, if he's got his fastball, he can either have his changeup, his curveball, his slider. If one of those is working, to go with his fastball, and he can spot it pretty well. Despite, I feel like, he's walked 5 batters already so far, but I feel like his command is better than that. I have no issues about if he's going to walk too many guys. But yeah, he's just like so savvy out there, and the stuff is good to go with it. So it's like, if you compare it to Drew Rom, and great start by him to the season as well, he's been really, really in control of what he wants to do out there. But Povich is like Rom if he had a tick or 2 better stuff quality to all his pitches.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't get to watch his second outing, but I know the first one. I don't know if it was like first start, jitters, whatever it was. The control just wasn't there. I think 3 of those 5 walks came in that first start. So clearly cleaned it up in the second outing. Like I said, the 79 pitches, 50 strikes, pounding the strike zone in that start. That's good. If you can pound the strike zone and get the whiffs, that's the good sign. Everything else will fall into place for Povich for sure. It's just we've been such big proponents of the pitching in this system, and we get comments all the time about how these guys aren't that good. The pitching depth isn't there. And yeah, you may not have the Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall ceiling type guys in this system per se. Povich may be one of those. But you've got a big collection of viable pitching prospects in the system now. And you're starting to see everything that was talked about them this offseason, not by us, not by the organization, but by Baseball America, by Fangraphs, a lot of the positives that they were pointing out all offseason with some of these guys, they're showing it this year. They're noticeably improving on whether it's certain pitches, their demeanor, pounding the strike zone, whatever it is. Each guy you can point to, they're doing this, and this better. This is probably the coolest storyline of the season so far down the minor leagues. One of maybe the next guy we talk about, and then the final segment's the best storyline. But this is one of the better storylines in all of the minor leagues so far this year. Is that the pitching prospects for the Orioles are showing up early on. And I'm going to do whatever I have to do to make sure that's not jinxed right now because I said that out loud.
Before we move on from pitching entirely, I will mention Drew Rahm's performance last week against what, as Nick mentioned, is a pretty tough Nashville lineup. He had 2 starts, and he went a combined 11 scoreless innings, allowing just 5 hits with 9 strikeouts. He did walk 4 batters, but 3 of those 4 walks came in his final outing where he was laboring a little bit more than he had, but still managed to pick up the win, which was on Sunday with 5 shutout innings. One thing that has been interesting about Rahm this season is that so far, through 3 outings, a ground ball percentage is 64%. We know that keeping the ball down is really key for him. That's been a part of his success at prior levels to AAA. So the ground ball rate is there, and it seems like the command maybe still has a little ways to go, but is better than where he left it at the end of last season.
Yeah, he did struggle a little bit when he was up in AAA at the end of last year, but I think that was, again, he had logged, I don't remember how many innings total he had last year, but I'm pretty sure by the time he got to Norfolk, he was already close to like a career high in innings at that point, or maybe I'm thinking about somebody else, but still long season, new baseball in AAA, getting used to all of that. This year, he's had 3 fantastic starts, 11 innings, no runs, 5 hits, 9 strikeouts in 2 games last week against Nashville. So I think the one thing that I've noticed from Rahm is he started out in his first start of the season, not a lot of swing and miss, not a lot of strikeouts, but he had a ton of ground ball outs, like you just mentioned. And then the swing and miss has improved with each start. This is why it's so cool that we can look at the StatCast data. You see the slider, for instance. The slider was his bread and butter pitch the last outing. It had, let me see, well, technically a sweeper is what Baseball Savant types it as, a sweeper. He had 1 whiff on 10 swings in the first start against Nashville, and then he threw it more in the zone in the second start, 3 whiffs, lower contact rate against the slider in the zone. I mean, improvements across the board for Drew Rahm. I don't think he's getting called up anytime soon, to be completely honest. He's going to have a lot more to prove down at AAA, but to have a guy like Drew Rahm sitting there waiting, he's already on the 40-man. If something drastic does happen at the major league level, you've got a pretty good safety net down there in Drew Rahm.
Yeah, I mean, he threw 120 innings last year. So if he can get up to 150 this year, I mean, you got 2 Cole Irvins in AAA. I feel like that's the kind of pitcher Rahm can be. I think having him in the same locker room right now is only going to help a guy like Drew Rahm. Irvin, and Rahm has better stuff than Irvin. Let's be honest. But if he can, just learn from the sequencing and just mixing pitches and hitting your spots and stuff and get weak contact, then I see no reason to, maybe not for the Orioles, just because we're going to have a higher threshold of what we want as a competitive team and soon to be powerhouse, potentially, speak it into existence. I think he's easily a guy that, for the Orioles, he might be a swingman, but for another team, he could easily be like an innings eater, left-handed pitcher for especially a team like the A's where Irvin came from. So, yeah, all good things for Ram. I agree with Nick. I think he might be a guy that's in AAA maybe all season, but it's only going to help him as we get into 2024. If he can get those innings in and that experience against that level of competition, he could get a spot start called up here and there, depending on where the rotation lines up. If an injury happens or if they need a bullpen arm quickly in a doubleheader per se, he could get, some major league time this year. But I think they're really going to try to gear him up for next year.
We'll go down to Bowie now and look at a hitter who is off to a very hot start. And you've been following his trajectory over the last 7 months or so. It does not come as a surprise. Heston Kjerstad, through his first 10 games at Bowie, hitting 282 with an OPS of over 1,100. That includes a slugging percentage that sits at 718, 5 home runs, 7 RBIs. Of course, that's just 39 at-bats, a small sample size. But this is coming off of a spring training where he was certainly one of the Orioles' best hitters in Major League camp, and he was up most of the month. Off of a performance in the Arizona Fall League where he won league MVP, on top of a good run over his final weeks at Aberdeen last season, including in the South Atlantic League playoffs. So, Bob, I'll start with you here. With what you have seen from Kjerstad so far over these first 10 games, is this breakout just going to continue for the rest of the season and onward?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm a believer now. He seems fully healthy, fully conditioned, fully back from the myocarditis and up to game speed and physically strong. Clearly had a breakout spring training with the Orioles and has just done nothing but continue that into the AA season. Just looks really strong. If you look at his numbers in Aberdeen and Delmarva, basically his walk and strikeout rate are right in between, like right in the middle of where those numbers were. He had a 13% walk rate in low A, then like an 8.5 in high A. Right now he's got a 12. Strikeout rate 17% in low A, 25% in high A. He's at 21%, 21.5. So those are great numbers. If he can keep those, his BABIP is not even high. It's like 286, which is, I think, average is like just over 300. And he's still batting 314 with an ISO of almost 500. Like, the power is stupid. 2 doubles, 5 home runs. And it's easy power, too. And the one thing for me is that he's playing a lot of first base DH. So that tells me we're getting you up to the next level as soon as possible, because that's the position where the Orioles are a little bit weakened. And if they think his bat can help that much, get him used to the DH first base. And he has played some outfield, too. But, this is a guy I feel like they're fast tracking him. Maybe not for this year. Maybe he could get a cup of coffee in September for the Orioles. But I think this is the guy they're hoping to get their Rookie of the Year bonus draft pick in 2024.
Yeah, the power is just so impressive. I mean, just shots to dead center field down there in Bowie, and not just like Prince George's home runs. These are deep major league shots. I just think he's giving off a lot of the same energy that he gave off when he was at Delmarva. And I don't know, when he got to Aberdeen last year, I don't know if he was just exhausted. I think we talked about this before, how probably mentally, I think he was probably just put through a ringer with, I'm back, first full season. Now I've got the hamstring injury and gets delayed again. And then he gets challenged for the first time in his career, getting moved up to Aberdeen. And we all saw what happened when the frustrations finally got the best of him. That was a defining moment so far of his early career, because ever since then, he has not stopped hitting the baseball. So, if you need to smash anything again, just do it, Heston, because clearly it worked. But I was skeptical of the power, right? Just him as a prospect. We didn't know where to rank him. He's outside of our top 10, I think, to begin the season. So he's in the top 10 now because we've got graduations, but we weren't the only ones. I don't think anyone still truly had an idea of where to rank him. But I think we have a better idea now. It's just, it's smooth, easy swing. He looks so comfortable. He's stealing bases too. He is aggressive on the base paths in these games. But I was skeptical about the power just because Arizona's a launching pad. Sarasota's a launching pad. You're like, all right, how legit is all of this? Clearly it's legit. He's got 5 home runs already. And actually, I didn't realize this until looking at his line now. He did go 0 for 4 with a strikeout tonight, Tuesday night. But no one in Bowie hit the baseball except Kobe Mayo, who drilled a home run because he's Kobe Mayo. But Heston had reached base in every single game this year before tonight. So, yeah, we had to wait 3 years, but the wait for Heston Kjerstad has been well worth it.
Yeah, everything that I think he's doing everything you would want him to do so far. That strikeout rate, I think, is perfectly acceptable for someone who hits for power and can draw walks. It's not like he's a two outcome hitter. And when he puts the ball in play, he hits it hard. He's got very good back control, which is not a skill that we heard a lot about coming out of college that I think we have seen a little bit of so far this season. Good back control. And that's going to allow him, I think, to kind of avoid being one of those guys where kind of like Joey Gallo, where we've seen him hit for power, but in a good year, he's going to hit 200. I feel like Kjerstad can avoid that.
Yeah, I don't think he's a Joey Gallo either. There's not that much swing and miss. Even when he was struggling and averaging 25% is, again, that's not that high for a power hitter these days. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to be a huge strikeout guy struggling to make contact. Yeah, I think maybe around 240, 250 might be a low point. But, yeah, Joey Gallo, he's a rare case these days, I feel like.
And you mentioned the playing first base, and he's also hitting the leadoff for Bowie a lot, but playing first base and DHing. So I don't think he's going to be in Bowie for very long. And I think by the Orioles putting him at first base on opening day for Bowie's lineup, I think that told everybody right there, he's not going to be in Bowie for very long. As long as he hits, you're going to move him up to Norfolk. So let's get him comfortable at first base now, because you do have Colton Cowser and Hudson Haskin, RIP Hudson Haskin, come back soon, in that outfield. You want them in the outfield. You need those speedy center field types in the outfield. You've got Des Cameron, who clearly this organization wanted to keep around and wants to see if something can click for him. You have no issues benching Des Cameron for Heston Kjerstad, but still, you want him to get playing time. Kyle Stowers, I think they knew Kyle Stowers is going to find his way back to AAA as well. You want him in the lineup pretty much every night. So if you can put Kjerstad at first base DH and have all these guys in that Norfolk lineup, then yeah, hit in Norfolk. Maybe you are in the major leagues by the end of the year, but I think they're going to be pretty aggressive with Kjerstad. If he keeps hitting like this, I could see them actually being very aggressive with Kjerstad this year.
Completely agree. And we'll move on now to our final segment of the show where we shout out players outside of our top 30 prospect list for something they've done recently, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or it's just something interesting in their stat line that we think is worth bringing up. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Nick on this one.
Yes. Who did I put down here for this one? I went with two guys who have been kind of interesting to watch. One is Douglas Hodo down in Delmarva. He's just had a weird stat line, and I just think it's hilarious. He did go hitless in that shorter opening series they had, but he drew 3 walks. Like, all right. Then last week, he went 3 for 10 with 6 walks. So he's got a 563 on base percentage last week alone. All 3 hits were singles, and he did strike out 4 times. He has 7 strikeouts on the year, but he has a 520 on base percentage. So I think it's just a fun early season stat line there. We know he's got really good defense. Douglas Hodo, another name in that Delmarva lineup that is just continuing to hit extremely well. And then Easton Lucas. I put Easton Lucas just because I wanted to shout him out. I was going to go stick with Delmarva and stick with Yaki Rivera, my boy. But I wanted to shout out Easton Lucas, give him some airtime because we talked about him so much this winter. And then he goes out, pitches 2 no-hit innings, no walks, 4 strikeouts for Bowie last week. So on the year, he's got 3 no-hit innings, no walks, and 6 strikeouts. I think it's just a pretty impressive way to start the year for him, and always really nice to see pitchers in this system back up any hype, like I mentioned earlier, that they get from outside evaluators and the talking heads out there.
Yeah, you might want to start calling the Orioles minor league system Mount Olympus, just because there's so many walkouts down there. Good choices for me. I went with Steven Acevedo for my hitter. Just feel like this is a guy who we've probably been talking about a little bit of prospect fatigue, and he hasn't even really got through Delmarva yet, just because, signed when he was 16, one of the first international signings. He was late, and he's a big, tall guy, 6'4". He's still only 20 years old, which is crazy. Same with like Elio Prado, another super young guy who we traded for in 2019. That not used to that quite yet. But Acevedo, who struggled a lot last year when he got to Delmarva, he batted 168 over 147 plate appearances. But then he would do okay when he went back down to the FCL. His walk rate was higher in the FCL, strikeout rate significantly lower. Well, this year he might be starting to figure something out. Only 32 plate appearances, but he's walking 9.5% of the time, only striking out 15% of the time. He's batting 429 with a 163 WRC plus, and it's just good to see him get off to a good start. You know, you still got to maintain that, but he's also 1 for 3 tonight with a double. So continuing to keep it up. I'd like to see it. And my pitcher's Connor Gillespie, who is like refreshed and a new person now that he's out of Aberdeen. He's in Bowie, and he's striking out more batters than ever. He's walking less than he did last year so far. Got a 1.29 ERA over 7 innings, only 2 games he's played in, but 9 strikeouts, only 3 walks, 2.67 xFIP. Just like to see it. You know, this is probably a guy who he's 25 years old and he's just getting to AA, so he's probably a relief prospect if anything, but if he can strike out batters and limit those walks, then there's something there potentially.
Good choices. I'm going to start with my hitter, and that's Adam Retzbach. In 3 games last week against Hudson Valley, which was a really tough series for the Ironbirds, Retzbach actually performed well at the plate, going 4 for 12 with 3 extra base hits, including 2 doubles and a home run. The catching situation at the A ball levels this season is so interesting because you have Samuel Basayo and Creed Willems down in Delmarva, and you know that both of those guys can hit, and Willems right now looks like someone who could be one of the first big names to be promoted out of Delmarva. And then you have Ardoin. Silas Ardoin is the starter at Aberdeen, who we know a lot of people in national media that cover the Orioles are pretty high on because he's a good defender, draws a lot of walks, and the kind of guy who could move quickly if things click for him. And then you have Retzbach, who's a solid defender, but so far making the most of his opportunities at the plate for the Ironbirds, which is good to see. And then for my pitcher, I'm going with Garrett Stallings. Stallings on Sunday delivered 6 shutout innings with 3 strikeouts and just 2 hits against Akron. So far this season, Stallings has thrown 11 innings, struck out 7 batters, walked 0, and allowed just 1 home run. And that's really the key for Stallings, is limiting the home run. I don't want to get too excited about his performance to this point because we've seen a lot of extremes with Garrett Stallings in his 2 years in the Orioles farm system now, where he can go on a 5-start stretch where he looks like one of the worst starting pitchers in this organization. Then he can put together 3 or 4 starts where he looks like one of the best and one of the most efficient. But right now, the encouraging sign is that he's not giving up a lot of hard contact. He's not giving up the long ball, and he's not walking anybody. And if he can continue to do that, maybe he finally gets that shot at AAA.
Let's just see how he gets through the month of June this year before we talk him up too much. No, great to see that start. Yeah, picking up where he left off. I think, you know, there's a little bit of a cluster of pitchers in AAA that, you know, there's no rush to get him up there, but I would like to see how he does there. And yeah, I was going to say, other than the Dodgers, I feel like the Orioles might have some of the best group of catching prospects in the game between Basayo, Willems, Retzbach, Ardoin hit a home run tonight, Maverick Hanley, AA. Don't worry about them.
Connor Pavoloni just can't stay. He can't stay healthy. I think talking about Garrett Stallings for a second, no walks this season. Just I still don't know what it is, and we still need to get somebody on. Who's the pitching coach now at Bowie? The old guy left.
Forrest Herman.
Forrest Herman got the promotion. Yeah, we need Forrest Herman on this show, and he can give us the lowdown on what exactly is a Garrett Stallings, because I do not know. But that was a really fun outing from him. Just a good week of pitching down on the farm. Another good week, another good night tonight too. But Cole Irvin actually finished pretty well against Rochester. And then shout out Dean Kramer, who apparently somebody pissed him off before the game because my man pitched lights out tonight. So hopefully this is a sign of better things to come for the pitching in Birdland.
And if you want to know the true power that 18-year-old Sammy Basayo has, check out his home run that he hit tonight. It looked like a Chris Davis trying to foul off a pitch on that upper outside part of the zone, and he just lined it over the left field wall like it was nothing, like it was an emergency hack bomb to the opposite field. So this kid's going to keep getting stronger if he starts turning on the ball frequently. Forget about it.
That Delmarva team is fun to watch right now with him and Jackson Holiday and Creed Willems all off to excellent starts. You're certainly going to want to tune into them and, frankly, any of the Orioles affiliates right now because chances are you're going to see pretty good baseball, win or lose, and hopefully things go well on the pitching front up and down the organization from here. Bob, Nick, and I will be back next week on Monday night to talk more Orioles minor leagues and some major league coverage as well. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at BSL on the Verge and check us out on Facebook and Instagram as well. You'll see not only our coverage throughout the week of the minor leagues, but also have access to our major league mailbag. We're going to open that up for questions here in the coming days. Remember, if you are a member of our Patreon community, you have not only first dibs on the questions that are asked on the show, but you get first access to the show, that and other daily content. You're also going to want to check out BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com over the next week, not only for Orioles coverage, but NFL draft coverage as well. That is coming up here later this month. And we'll be back next week for Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. This is Zach Swedden you've been listening to on The Verge.
Don't forget to check us out throughout the week on 105.7 as well. Goodbye.